What if the one prayer you gave up on was already on its way to your front door? That's exactly what happened to a broken rancher on the coldest night of his life. He wasn't expecting anyone. He wasn't even sure he believed in anything anymore. And then someone knocked. Stick around, because this story about a stranger, a storm, and a second chance is going to stay with you long after it ends. Picture Wyoming, 1887. A ranch buried under snow, miles from anyone. Inside a small wooden cabin, a man named Ethan Hale sits alone by a dying fire, his hands rough from years of work that never seemed to pay off. 2 brutal winters. Sick cattle. A failed harvest. The kind of bad luck that doesn't just take your money, it takes your hope too. Ethan used to believe hard work and faith could beat anything. Now he's not so sure the Lord even remembers his name. He looks at an old photo on the mantle, him as a boy, standing next to his parents, the kind of people who believed Christmas could still be magic even when nothing else was going right. Ethan isn't sure he believes that anymore. He walks to the window. Snow is falling so thick he can't even see the fence line. And under his breath, more out of habit than faith, he says something like a prayer. Not a hopeful one. A tired one. If you're still up there, if this place is still worth saving, just give me something. Anything. Nothing happens. Just the wind. Just silence. Then his eyes land on an old Bible sitting on the table, the one he hasn't touched since the bank sent him that letter. He picks it up anyway. It falls open on its own to a verse about walking through deep water and not drowning. He reads it twice. It almost makes him feel something again. And that's the exact moment someone knocks on his door. Out here, in a storm like this, nobody comes knocking. Not by accident. Ethan grabs his lantern, heart pounding, and opens the door to find a woman standing in the snow, clutching a beat-up suitcase like it's the only thing keeping her upright. Frost on her bonnet. Cheeks red from the cold. And this look in her eyes, scared, but steady, like she'd already decided she wasn't leaving no matter what he said. She tells him her name is Grace. She says she's from the matrimonial agency in the city. She says she's his bride. Now here's the twist Ethan wasn't ready for. Months earlier, in a moment of pure loneliness, he'd written to that agency asking for a wife. But he never sent the payment. He figured that was the end of it. He'd basically forgotten he ever asked. And yet here she is. She walked the last few miles alone after her coach broke down, because she was terrified she'd get there too late. Too late for what, he asks. Too late for you to still want a wife, she says. He doesn't really know what to say to that. So he just says the only thing that makes sense to a practical man standing in a blizzard: you're either the bravest person I've ever met, or completely out of your mind. Either way, get inside before you freeze. That night, as she unpacks the little she owns, a worn Bible, a hairbrush, a small tin of sewing needles, Ethan watches her from across the room and realizes something. She's young, but there's something old in the way she carries herself. Like someone who's already survived more than her share of hard winters, long before this one. She kneels at the hearth and brings the dying fire back to life like it's second nature. You've been letting the flame die, she says softly. And without really meaning to, he mutters back, I've been letting everything die. She hears him. And for a second, something in her face softens even more. Then maybe I got here just in time, she says. Outside, the wind keeps howling. But inside that little cabin, for the first time in longer than Ethan can remember, it actually feels warm. Not because of the fire. Because of her. He doesn't know it yet, but that knock on the door wasn't just a stranger showing up. It was the answer to the prayer he basically stopped believing anyone was listening to. The next morning, the storm has calmed and sunlight is breaking through the clouds. Ethan wakes up to the smell of real food, actual coffee, actual cornbread cooking on the stove, and for a second he thinks he must be dreaming, because he hasn't smelled coffee in weeks. Grace is already up, sleeves rolled, hair coming loose from its braid, humming an old hymn like she's done it every morning of her life. Turns out she used to be a schoolteacher back in Missouri, up before sunrise every day for the children. Old habits, she says. Hard to shake. But when Ethan asks more about her life before this, something shifts in her voice. She says simply that she didn't have much left to stay for. And something about the way she says it tells him not to push. Instead he asks the real question. Why would you travel all this way for a man who never even sent for you? And here's where it gets interesting. She pulls a folded, worn piece of paper from her coat. His own letter. The one he wrote in his lowest moment, the one where he admitted he'd lost more than just cattle, that he'd lost his faith, that he didn't know if love had any place left in a life like his. That was supposed to be private, he says, embarrassed. It was honest, she tells him. And that's exactly why I came. I didn't want your money. I wanted a purpose again. Maybe we both needed saving. He doesn't have a response to that. Talking about God isn't something he does easily anymore. Not after everything the land had taken from him. Later, they walk out to the barn together. The few surviving cows are shivering, wrapped in old blankets, one of them lying weak in the straw, burning with fever. Ethan admits he's out of money for a vet, out of ideas, out of everything. Grace crouches beside the sick animal and just rests her hand there for a moment, quiet, like she's praying without saying a word. Sometimes, she says, warmth and a little care go further than money ever could. He watches her, this delicate-looking woman who walked through a blizzard alone, now kneeling in dirty straw without a second thought, and he says the thing that's been sitting in his chest since last night. You're not what I expected. She smiles without even looking up. Neither are you. Later that day they ride into town to make the marriage official, her idea, not his. And the town, of course, has opinions. One man mutters that the poor girl doesn't know what she's getting herself into. Ethan's jaw tightens, but Grace doesn't flinch. She says, calm as anything, that a woman's worth isn't in what a man owns, but in what two people can build together. The room goes quiet. The clerk practically trips over his own paperwork. On the ride home, Ethan tells her she talks awfully bold for someone who just met him. And she says something that sticks with him for days afterward, faith makes you bold. You'll learn that again soon enough. That night, mending a broken chair by the fire, she tells him plainly, I didn't come here to be taken care of. I came to help, if you'll let me. I've seen worse places than this get put back together. A place can heal, if the people on it still believe it's worth saving. He doesn't know it yet, but that sentence is about to change everything. Now here's something the original story never really gets into, and it's worth pausing on, because this idea isn't just true for a broken-down ranch in 1887, it's true right now, for you. Think about a garden in the dead of winter. Nothing's growing. It looks abandoned, even dead. But underneath the frozen dirt, the roots are still alive. They're just waiting for one thing, somebody to believe it's still worth watering. That's basically what Grace becomes for this ranch. Not a miracle worker. Just somebody who refused to treat something broken like it was already finished. Over the next week, the ranch starts to feel different. Ethan's up before dawn like always, but now there's the smell of fresh bread in the mornings, the sound of someone humming while they work, floorboards creaking under two sets of footsteps instead of one. He tells himself it's just gratitude. Somebody to cook, somebody to help out. But deep down, something in him that had gone cold for years is starting to thaw, and he knows it. One morning he finds Grace in the barn rubbing some homemade mixture into the side of a sick cow, smells like mint and pine. Turns out, before teaching, she worked alongside a doctor, and it wasn't just book learning, it was hands-on healing. Fever remedies. Infection care. Everything can heal, she tells him, if it gets enough care. Even people. She glances up at him when she says that last part, and he feels it lands somewhere deep. They ride into the nearest town for supplies, and the whispers start again the second they walk in. That's Hale's bride. Won't last till spring, someone mutters behind a barrel of flour. Grace hears every word. Her cheeks go pink, but she just picks up a bolt of fabric and asks Ethan calmly if the color would suit the curtains. That's it. That's her whole response. And somehow it shuts the whole room up faster than any argument could. Outside, Ethan's fuming. You shouldn't have to hear people talk like that, he says. And she looks out toward the mountains and tells him people talk like that because they don't understand what faith looks like while it's still under construction. He asks what faith does look like, then. She smiles. It looks like a man who keeps trying, even after everyone else stopped believing he could. That night, he finally asks about her past. About what happened before she got on that train. And this is where the story gets heavier. She tells him about a powerful man back home who came after her family's house the moment her father died, and said she could keep it if she married him instead. She refused. So he made sure she lost everything, her job, her reputation, her whole life there. She says it plainly, but he can see it still costs her something to say it out loud. You walked through a blizzard to start over with a total stranger, he says, just because you read one letter. Because your letter didn't have bitterness in it, she tells him. It had loss. And I figured any man who still prayed, even through all his doubt, wasn't really lost at all. He tells her, quietly, that he's not sure he believes that about himself anymore. Then I'll believe it for both of us, she says. Later that night he finds her asleep by the fire, her Bible open beside her, one verse underlined, something about all things being made new. He looks at her for a long moment and thinks, maybe she isn't just someone who answered a letter. Maybe she's the answer he didn't know how to ask for. Weeks pass. The snow starts loosening its grip and green starts poking through here and there. Ethan walks out one morning and hears something he hasn't heard on this land in a long time, noise. Life. He follows it to the barn and finds Grace working like she's lived there her whole life, mixing something in a bowl, humming to herself, tending to that same sick cow, whose breathing sounds stronger now. Turns out the cattle weren't sick from some mystery plague at all. They'd been eating moldy hay from the bottom of the storage shed, damp from a leaky roof. Something Grace recognized instantly from her time back home. Juniper oil, vinegar, salt, she made a remedy right out of his own pantry. You'd be surprised, she tells him, what kind of cures are hiding in the simplest places. By the end of the week, the change in the herd is impossible to ignore. Coats shining, calves feeding again, everyone standing a little taller, animals included. Ethan watches her work and admits, almost to himself, that he doesn't fully understand how she's doing it. She just says, sometimes healing doesn't start with the body. It starts the moment somebody believes things can be fixed at all. That Sunday they go to church together for the first time, someplace Ethan hasn't set foot in almost 2 years. And the whispers around town have already started to shift. Is that Hale? Man's got some life back in him. Heard his herd's coming back too. That woman must be some kind of blessing. After the service, word starts spreading fast that Grace has a gift for healing animals, at first. A farmer's lame horse. A neighbor's sick mule. She never charges a cent. People bring what they can instead, a bag of oats, a plank of wood, a bundle of wool. And slowly, this dying ranch turns into the one place in the whole valley people know they can turn to when something's broken. One evening, sitting together on the fence watching the herd graze in the last of the daylight, Ethan tells her plainly, "You changed this place." And she corrects him. "No," she says, "you changed it, the moment you let me try." Spring rolls in fully now. Green pastures where there used to be nothing but snow and worry. One afternoon a wagon comes rushing up the trail, a family, their young boy pale and bleeding, his arm wrapped in a bloody bandage after a bad fall on some fence wire. The nearest doctor is 20 miles off and the wound's already turning bad. They'd heard, somehow, that the woman at the Hale ranch knew healing. Grace doesn't hesitate for a second. She cleans and wraps the boy's arm with total calm, murmuring quiet prayers the whole time she works. When the mother, in tears, asks how she can ever repay her, Grace just says, "Help somebody else when they need it." That's payment enough. That night, Ethan leans in the doorway and points out she could easily be charging people for what she does. Folks would pay good money. But Grace shakes her head. "The second I do this for profit," she says, "it stops being a gift. This isn't my power. It's his." Weeks later, sitting by the fire, Grace finally tells Ethan the part of her past she'd been holding back, that the man who ruined her life back home might still be out there, might still come looking. Ethan doesn't hesitate either. He takes her hand and tells her plainly, nobody is taking her away from here. Not now, not ever. If that man shows up, he'll find a husband standing beside her, and a faith he can't touch. That's the moment, more than any other, where something between them shifts for good. He pulls her close, and for the first time, she lets herself lean into it completely. By that Christmas Eve, 1 full year after that first knock on the door, the ranch is unrecognizable. Where there was silence, now there's laughter. A little cedar tree stands by the hearth, decorated with ribbons and dried apples. Ethan's carving something out of cedar wood by the fire while Grace kneads bread at the table, glancing his way every few minutes, catching him watching her every single time. Then it happens again, a frantic knock at the door. 2 ranch hands from a neighboring property, breath steaming, faces red from the cold. A wagon's gone off the road on the north trail. A woman and her boy trapped inside, in near whiteout conditions. Grace is already grabbing her shawl before Ethan even finishes explaining how dangerous it is out there. "You didn't think I'd let someone freeze out there on Christmas Eve, did you?" she says. There's no arguing with her once her mind's made up. They fight through the storm and find the wagon half buried near the creek, the horse trembling, a woman and her son huddled together under a torn blanket, the boy's leg cut and bleeding, frozen at the edges. Grace climbs in without a second thought, presses her own shawl to the wound, and gets them moving. Back at the ranch, she works by firelight cleaning and wrapping the injury while the mother weeps quiet prayers of thanks at the table. When the boy finally falls asleep, exhausted, Ethan kneels beside Grace and tells her, "You did it again. Saved another soul." She shakes her head. "Not me," she says. "Christmas doing what it always does. Reminding us who we really are." And that's when Ethan finally says what's been building in him for a year. That she came to him as someone he didn't even think he deserved, and became the answer to every prayer he'd whispered and given up on. He pulls out a small cedar carving from his pocket, a cross, simple but strong, something he made with his own hands to hang above the hearth. Not just to remember what they'd survived, he tells her, but everything still ahead of them. She kisses him. Slow, warm, certain. A kiss that tastes like every hard winter finally paying off. 1 more year passes. By the next Christmas, the ranch, now known around the valley as Grace's Landing, is unrecognizable from where it started. It's full of people, full of laughter, full of the kind of life Ethan once thought he'd lost for good. Neighbors who used to whisper about him now show up for advice. Widows Grace helped bring their families over. Kids run through the halls in their Sunday best. The local pastor stands up in front of the whole gathering and says something that hits different than any sermon before it. A year ago he'd prayed for mercy over a land that had lost its way, and now he's standing in living proof that the prayer worked. This ranch, he says, isn't just a home anymore. It's a testimony. The crowd pushes Ethan to say a few words, and he, never one for speeches, stands up anyway, hat in his hands, and admits something he never thought he'd say out loud in front of a room full of people. That not too long ago he'd given up on this land, and on himself right along with it. Then God sent him someone he never asked for, but exactly who he needed. She came through a snowstorm, he says, and somehow she brought the sunlight in with her. Everything she touched started coming back to life, this ranch, these animals, and him too. He tells the room straight, if you're out there thinking your life is too far gone, or that you've been forgotten, remember this. Sometimes the answer doesn't come with thunder. Sometimes it comes as a whisper. And a knock at the door. As the sun sets and the last wagon disappears down the snowy trail, Ethan and Grace stand alone in the yard, watching the world glow orange in the fading light. She asks him quietly if he ever thinks about how far they've come. He pulls her close and tells her, every single day. You gave me back more than a ranch. You gave me a reason to keep going. Snow starts falling again, soft and slow, like the whole sky is blessing the ground beneath them. So here's the real question this story leaves you with. You don't need a snowstorm and a stranger at your door to believe something in your life can still turn around. Sometimes it just takes one person, or honestly, sometimes just one decision, to stop treating something broken like it's already finished. So tell me, if hope knocked on your door tonight, would you even recognize it? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if this story moved you even a little, stick around, because there's more where this came from.